Welcome to the Vietnamese Poetry, Literature channel. Today we will listen to the fairy tale Coconut Skull. Let's listen. Once upon a time, there was a couple who lived for a rich man for nearly a lifetime. The couple is very gentle, over 50 years old and has no children. One hot sunny day, the wife went into the forest to collect firewood for her master. She was so thirsty that she couldn't find a stream. She went to the hollow of a big tree to see if there was any rainwater remaining, and saw a human skull next to a rock left by a tiger long ago. The skull was full of clear water. Although she was scared, she was so thirsty that she took the risk to drink it. As soon as the water passed her neck, she suddenly felt unusually refreshed, soaking into her intestines. Not long after, she discovered she was pregnant. Not long after, the husband also died. The work in the rich man's house falls on his wife. She worked hard all day, ate hungry and wore ragged clothes, but still had the joy of having a baby. After 9 months and 10 days, she gave birth to a round, furry lump of flesh, with a face, nose, mouth, ears, but no arms or legs. Just as she was about to throw it away, the lump of meat suddenly told her, "Mom, I'm human, Mom. Mom, don't leave me, poor child." She was moved, wrapped the lump of meat in her arms, cherished it and breastfed it. Knowing that, the rich man thought it was a monster and forced her to bury the meat, but she did not listen. The rich man immediately kicked her out to a hut outside the cassava garden. The child looked really strange, but he was so smart, she named him Sodua. Every early morning, before going into the rich man's house to work, she often told him, "Son Dua, stay at home and be a good boy, then I'll bring you a ball of rice, Sodua." When she went out of the thatched hut, Sodua had turned into a very pretty little girl, cleared the door and then crawled back into the round head, lying in the corner of the house. She came back and was surprised, but she kept looking and saw nothing, so she couldn't help it. Wherever he went, Sodua rolled around. People in the village were afraid at first, but gradually got used to it. Seeing that Coconut Skull was wise, many people even gave Coconut Skull gifts. One day, she came home looking sad and unhappy like usual. Seeing that, Sodua asked, she sighed and told her son, "My child is already herding buffalo and goats at the age of 7 or 8, but I don't expect anything from you. Now the boss has a herd of goats but hasn't found a shepherd yet. If only you were like us, you'd be able to add a little more rice to the pot." Coconut Skull said to his mother, "Mom, I can take care of her. I'm a good shepherd, Mom, just go in and talk to the rich man." Coconut Skull urged his mother to go in and tell the rich man. At first, he pushed it away, afraid that if he gave Sodua to herd he would lose his goat, but seeing that the old lady kept begging, and hearing that Sodua was very smart, he told her, "Yes, let me tell you. From tomorrow on, the woman will come here every morning to chase the goats up the mountain, then in the afternoon chase the goats back." The old lady was happy, but in her heart she was still worried. Since Coconut Skull herded the goats, on sunny days as well as rainy days, the goats were always full, visibly fat, as big as the wind, making the rich man very satisfied. What he liked best was that every day Coconut Skull only ate 2 very small balls of rice from him. The rich man had 3 daughters. The eldest daughter was cruel, the second daughter was sour, only the third daughter was gentle. On harvest days, everyone goes to the fields to work, and her 3 girls have to take turns bringing rice to the mountain for Sodua. One day it was Auntie's turn to deliver food. When she reached the foot of the mountain, she heard the sound of a flute. The sound of the flute was sometimes high and low, sometimes fast and sometimes dull, penetrating her heart, making the girl naturally feel restless and sobbing. The mountain was undulating. She climbed a short distance and was halfway up the mountain, where the goats were feeding. Standing in the bushes and looking out, she saw a handsome young man about 16 or 17 years old playing the flute and sitting on a peach hammock tied to 2 tree branches. The birds perched on his hammock. He was still playing the flute, not knowing that someone was eavesdropping on him. The sound of the flute echoed throughout the mountains and forests. The young woman was so busy listening and looking that she immediately grabbed a dry branch. The branch cracked and cracked. Hearing the noise, the young man immediately transformed into Coconut Skull. From then on, she fell in love with Sodua. If she had anything delicious, she would hide it, so that when it was her turn to bring rice, she would bring it to Sodua. Sodua and her mother love each other very much. The mother's one concern is that if her child is not an identity, how can she expect to have a daughter-in-law? Sadua knew what he meant and told his mother. The rich man had 3 daughters. His mother tried to find a room to ask for one for her children. The mother laughed. "You're the one who's married to a ghost." But Sadua kept urging her, so she had to find a room to talk to the rich man. The old man stroked his beard and laughed mockingly, tried to suppress his anger, and told the old woman, "Is that bitch with such a weird shape and a trunk like that?" Thinking for a moment, he told the old woman. She came back and told him that if he had all these things, I would marry you. A pot of gold nuggets, 10 sheets of peach silk, 10 fat pigs, 10 fat goats, 10 jars of wine. I have to build 5 tiled houses. The first part is made of silver, the crossbeams are made of bronze, then I can bring the bride home. If your family's Sadua guy can find all those things, then you'll come here and tell me. She came home and told her son, thinking he had quit his job and wanted to get married. Unexpectedly, Coconut Skull told his mother, "I'll go right over and tell the rich man that you'll have those things." The mother was afraid that her child would speak recklessly and hesitated to go, but Sadua assured her that not only would there be enough, but there would also be more. The old lady came in again to talk to the rich man. This time the rich man seemed hesitant. The old man told him, "Let me call all 3 daughters out and see if any of them wants to marry her." He called his 3 daughters out one by one. The 2 eldest daughters both jumped up, and when it was the 3rd daughter's turn, as soon as she heard her father's question, she immediately said, "Dad, where do you put it? I'll sit there, please." The rich man didn't know what to say, so he went back to make an appointment with the old lady on the day to deliver the bride price. In his heart, he still thought that Sadua and his mother were just lying. "If you lie, then you and your mother will have to die with me." Soon the day came to pay the bride price. Coconut Skull still herds goats every day. Didn't show any concern. The old lady was worried and told Sadua, "I thought you were a saint, so I listened to you and asked to marry the rich man's daughter. Now that you're stuck like that, what am I going to do?" Coconut Skull just grinned, saying nothing. There was only 1 day left before I had to deliver the bride price to the rich man's house. Looking inside the old woman's house, she only saw a few torn mats and a few clay pots. She was worried and just wanted to take her child away, afraid that if she missed the appointment, she would bring trouble to herself. She sadly lay down on the cot, covered herself with a mat, and fell asleep without even realizing it. The next morning, when she opened her eyes, she saw that she was no longer in the old tent. She saw her lying in a brocade blanket on a mahogany bed. Coconut Skull also lies on a brocade mattress, covered with an embroidered blanket. Her broken walls had turned into a massive brick house, with silver top beams and bronze crossbeams. The old lady cried out with joy. But looking at her child, she felt sad. The house was like this, and the child was like that. She saw in the corner of the house a pot of gold nuggets, 10 sheets of peach silk, and right on the sidewalk, 20 fat pigs, 20 fat goats, and 20 jars of wine. She was so happy that she called Coconut Skull. "Come on, the groom is here, he's here to give the bride price." "Well, this is enough, my child," Sadua told his mother. "I saved 10 pigs, goats and wine each, to bring the bride home and serve as a feast for guests." Then Coconut Skull rolled from above and fell to the ground, approaching his mother. He turned downstairs and called, "Come on, they're not flying, they're all here." As soon as he finished calling, 20 male and female servants from the house downstairs ran up. Everyone wore clothes to cover their bodies. The old lady's eyes were dizzy, not understanding anything. The bride's offerings were carried to the rich man's house, and the old woman also had enough brocade, hats, and sandals to wear to welcome the bride. Only Sadua still rolls with his mother. At the rich man's house, everyone did not understand how Sadua and his mother could find such a gift. The rich man accepted the ceremony and married his 3rd daughter to Sadua. That afternoon, Sadua took his bride home. The table was very festive, family members were running in and out bustlingly. Villagers and neighbors filled the house, chatting like firecrackers. The cowherd boys and Sadua were all present. At night, when the big wax trees lit up the upper and lower houses, no one could see Coconut Skull anywhere. The villagers were about to leave when they suddenly saw a very handsome guy in the next room coming out with the bride. Everyone was stunned. Two people came to greet the guests. The young man said, "Dear elders and relatives, I am Sodua. My husband and I would like to greet the elderly and thank them and their relatives for coming to celebrate with our family." The happiest person was the mother. She hugged her daughter-in-law and her child, speechless. When the news that Sodua had become a handsome young man had just flown to the rich man's house, the two older sisters were both sad, jealous, and angry. From then on, Sodua diligently searched for books and waited for the exam. Sodua studied very intelligently and was famous throughout the region. Sure enough, when it came to the exam, Sodua passed the exam. While he was still in the capital, he heard the news that his mother had passed away. Not long after he returned home, there was a king's edict calling him to go on a mission. Before saying goodbye to his wife and leaving, he gave her a flint, a knife, and 2 eggs, telling her to always carry them with her. In case of an accident, she would know how to use them. Ever since they saw that I had married a handsome husband and passed the exam, my 2 older sisters planned to harm me, hoping to replace me as a candidate. Now that I see her alone at home, I often come over and try to harm her. One day, when the weather was cool and windy, 2 sisters came to invite me to go on a boat trip. The younger brother thought the 2 sisters loved him, so he immediately agreed to go. The 3 sisters got into a boat and rowed near the mouth of the tank. The river is vast, the waves are high, and there are often strong winds and big fish. The 2 sisters rowed the boat to take me out for a while, then rowed the boat to shore. They quickly jumped forward, collected all the oars, and pushed the boat out into the middle of the water. The boat was not rowed, was swept away by the whirlpool, and sank. Only then did the 2 older sisters scream, pretending to cry bitterly for a while, as if she had drowned while rowing a boat alone. As soon as the brothers' boat sank out of the water, an orca swallowed both the boat and the person into its stomach. My brother is still alert as usual. Remembering her husband's instructions, she used a knife to carve the fish's flesh, causing the fish to struggle for a while and then die floating on the water's surface. Fish carcasses drifted to a fish beach in the forest. The younger brother cut open the fish's belly and came out. She touched her pocket and saw 2 eggs and a flint still intact. She cut the fish's flesh, skimmed the salt from the bottom of the tank, then brought the fish under a dry tree to save for later consumption. She took dry grass and applied it to the flint, used a knife to strike the stone to create a fire to heat and grill. She took water, leaves, and built a temporary tent right near the river bank. Every day she goes to the forest to pick trees and dig tubers to eat instead of rice. One day she saw 2 eggs in her pocket stirring. She placed the eggs in the dry grass. After a while, the egg shells cracked and 2 chicks came out. She caught worms for the chickens to eat. The pair of chickens grew up very quickly. It didn't take long for them to clearly see 1 male and 1 female. She considered the chickens as her children. The chickens are very smart, they feel the love of people. Days passed, the jungle deepened, the girl was alone, she didn't know which way to go home. She had to wait for a boat to pass before calling. One afternoon, she suddenly heard the sound of a rooster crowing at the riverside. "Oh oh oh, oh oh. An official's boat had to take my aunt home." She quickly ran to the river and saw a rooster stretching its neck and a large boat entering the river. The closer the boat gets, the louder the rooster crows. "Ooh. An official's boat had to take my aunt home." She stood near her beloved pair of chickens. As soon as the chickens finished crowing, she saw a person in the boat come out and stand at the bow. That person is Sodua, her husband. Coconut Skull also sees wives, people who love each other, have good eyesight and good hearing. The boat landed on shore. He quickly walked up, she quickly ran down, holding each other's hands, choking without saying a word. Coconut Skull welcomed his wife onto the boat. After a while, listening to his wife tell the story, Sodua learned of the sinister greed of his 2 sisters. When he got home, he hid his wife in a private room, then arranged a party to invite his wife's family and neighbors to eat. The 2 sisters dressed elegantly. Hearing the news, the 2 of them slandered each other right from home. "Everyone wants to replace me as grandmother." Arriving at Sodua's house, the 2 of them fought over each other to tell Sodua the story of their younger brother's drowning, then sobbed but did not forget to fix their hair, and occasionally glanced at the situation. After half a week of drinking wine, Sodua stood up, went into the room and brought his wife out to greet everyone. As soon as they saw her, the two sisters' faces turned pale and their limbs fell apart. Taking advantage of the time when people were asking and chatting excitedly, they sneaked out and disappeared without a trace.